Well, the experts have spoken, and it's time to stop having babies. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Stephen Green and Bill Whittle, both of whom were babies at one point. Even I myself was. But we've got to stop this nonsense. This is Right Angle, made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, some 11,000 experts have signed on to a document calling for a number of ways of addressing the terrible crisis of global climate change, but one of which is that we need to stabilize the population, ideally gradually reduce that population within a framework that ensures social integrity. This, I thought, was an interesting phrase. I went for further clarification on that, and it says that population control would have to be approached with methods that ensured social and economic justice in order to sustain a morally and ecologically sound world. Now, Stephen Green, in view of the fact that those 11,000 experts are probably the same kind of people who would be supportive of, let's say, the choice to not have a baby after a baby has already been had, what kinds of social integrity do you think we need to invoke in order to stave off the terrible effects of climate change?
Well, when you put the word social in front of another word, you've created the opposite of what that word originally meant.
Yep.
Social justice is not justice. It's rigging the scales in favor of a person or a group that you favor, preferably yourself. So I read about, or I hear about social integrity, and I know immediately this isn't about any kind of integrity at all. It's about, who can we control them? What can we get away with? Because you know for damn sure that none of these 8 or 11,000 experts, they're not going to be the ones getting on board the cattle car, are they? No, because they're the experts. There was a very bad H.G. Wells-based movie from the 1930s called The World of Tomorrow or The World of the Future.
Give me a second.
I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was
Brave New World?
No, not Brave New World. It'll
I know
come
what
to
you're
me,
talking about.
hope.
I know what you're talking about.
So this movie, I'm guessing from the mid 30s, and it's so bad, and it's so H.G. Wells socialist, because all the science fiction writers at the time were very much into this, not just socialism but eugenics, which was just huge. It was like this awful hangover from the early progressive era in the early 1900s. And in this movie, there's the Second World War comes, and it never ends. It goes for decades. You know, most of humanity is reduced to living in the ruins and all that. When air communists appear out of the skies in their magical flying machines, and they bring apart peace and prosperity by telling everybody what to do. Literally flying. They were air communists who saved humanity from its own grievous sins. And the fantasy of it is just absurd. If you watch this movie, it's comically awful. I saw it, I think, on AMC when I was in college, and I just laughed my way through it. Except we're living in this age, again, where experts are going to descend from the heavens to tell us how to live our lives, and they're going to make everything better. No. They're going to make everything better for the flying air communists, and the rest of us are going to be living in our hovels because that's where the experts want us.
Well, Bill Whittle, I will say that this report that is signed onto by some 11,000 experts around the world is not all negative. Certainly, where the planet's being devastated, and we've spent 40 years, doing practically nothing of value to stave off the ultimate destruction of the race. Actually, they're not really concerned about the race so much as they are the other creatures on Earth. But in any case, they do point out some positive things that have happened, and this is that we are making progress. Here are the positive things that have happened, Bill. There's been a surge of concern. There have been emergency declarations. There have been school kids on strike. Eco lawsuits have made some progress in the courts, and there have been some grassroots citizens movements. Now, Bill, this report that was signed by these 11,000 experts came out one day after President Donald Trump began the formal withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Climate Accords. How do you think that the Trump administration can justify going up against the combined aggregate wisdom of 11,000 experts?
I can do that with my eyes closed and, while I'm in the shower.
Get on Twitter.
I don't know what to start with. Let's start with this. I think if it's all right with Steve, I'd like to borrow that term. I'd like to refer to these environmental experts as air communists from now on. Is
that an affiliate of Air America? Was that
no?
No.
Look, there's so much to say here. The main thing, just a couple of logical questions. First of all, when they say 11,000 experts, whatever that means, it's 11,000 experts operating out of two data sets, two sets of numbers that goes out to the entire community, and they make their computer models from those, and those numbers have been tampered with, and we know it from internal memos. So that's just for fun. The reason I'm not worried about this, and I know people look at you and think, well, you obviously just don't care about, whether you live or die or not. But I don't care about this. And I'll tell you why. If you don't mind, I would like you to read the just those things you said, the positive things. Could you read them to me one at a time? And I'll tell you why I'm not afraid of climate change.
These are the progress things that we've seen. There's been a surge of concern.
What there has not been has been a surge of seawater into the streets of Manhattan and leaving people, knee deep in seawater anywhere around the planet. That kind of surge we have not seen. Go ahead.
There have been emergency declarations regarding climate change.
There haven't been emergency measures to rescue people from Arizona because their roofs caught fire. There haven't been people dying in the thousands because of the global warming that is killing everybody all across the south of this country or anywhere else for that matter.
School kids on strike.
School kids are still alive.
Fair point. Eco lawsuits, a term I had not previously heard. Eco lawsuits moving forward in the courts.
Any kind of a new lawsuit is obviously good for the future of the country.
And finally, grassroots citizen movements.
We still have grassroots. You can look out the window and see them. They're not just brown shreds of shrubs and look like the end of a push broom. The earth has never been greener. It's absolutely true. Not since we've had satellites in orbit to take pictures of the earth. Earth is greener now than it's ever been because carbon dioxide levels are somewhat higher and everything grows a little better. So if these things were what I was saying, if it was a surge of seawater that didn't go away, or if it was, school children who were dying because of whatever reason, or emergency evacuations, any of that stuff was real, I'd be worried about it. But when all we have really to judge it by are these incredible terms for what is essentially a pretty badly run PR campaign, I find myself somewhat less terrorized than I would have been otherwise.
One must ask, when you hear something like 11,000 experts are calling for a reduction in the population, gradually, of course, incrementally, ideally, they say ideally, gradually. They're not committing fully to that idea of gradually. Ideally, it would be gradually, and that it would be reduced within a framework that ensures social integrity. You only have a couple of questions to ask with regard to this. First of all, who do we have to reduce the population of? Like where do those, do they mean everybody throughout the world needs to take an equal bite out of their population? Do leftists in the United States need to reduce their numbers by 10%? Do Africans on the west coast of Africa need to reduce their population by the same increment? Or are there some populations that are having too many babies and other populations, for example, the people in Japan have really cut down their fertility rate and frankly, their coital rate. They're just not having sex and they're not having babies. The United States is hot on their heels without being hot. And so we have this kind of idea in vague generalities and abstraction that we need to reduce the population. I want to go to specific cases right now. Which populations need to be reduced? And then the second question is, who decides? Who decides which populations need to be reduced and who decides which methods will be used to reduce those populations? Now, those of you who know about some of the early foundations of the Planned Parenthood movement know that Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist. She was somebody who thought that the world would be better off if we got rid of certain sorts of people or prevented certain sorts of people from having babies. Is that what you're looking for? Or do you think maybe it's time for, the oppressor race to step up and take the hit? And maybe it's time for, instead of the black people that Margaret Sanger was trying to get rid of, well, why don't we have the wealthy white people try to reduce their population? Well, who among you is going to, lead the march for this, that you will voluntarily say, we're just never going to have any more babies? The methods of birth control aren't that many. You can either stop doing it, you can either wrap it, or you can reject it after it's been conceived. So which one of these methods will be employed by these 11,000 experts around the world? This kind of talk, under the guise of science, under the threat of annihilation, that we should reduce the population on the earth, is one of the scarier things you're going to hear out of the mouths of what these people really are. Not scientists, but politicians. These are social manipulators who think that the planet would be much better off if you weren't here. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.